Happy New Year and welcome to another episode of the Integration Session podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and future of psychedelics. I'm Dr. Elena and today we're kicking off the new year with an exciting conversation with a fellow podcaster in the psychedelic space. Osheen Dayal holds a bachelor's in psychology from the University of British Columbia, where she served as co-president of the Women Empowerment Club, and is now pursuing a master's in counseling psychology at Adler University, where she's deepening her training in trauma-informed, culturally responsive therapy. Osheen leads the YouTube committee and is a podcast host at the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, or MAPS Canada. In this conversation, we explore Osheen's journey from starting a successful construction business in India to her work in psychedelic medicine advocacy in Canada. We discuss some of her favorite discussions as host of the MAPS Canada podcast, and also some of her insights on the field of psychedelic therapy in general. Let's get into it. Hello, Osheen, and welcome to the Integration Session podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
I'm good. So our listeners may or may not know this, but we just recorded a collaboration on your podcast with the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. So after this, they should definitely check that out as well.
Yes.
But for those who may have not seen that or heard that yet, could you just introduce yourself? Just a quick little introduction to who you are?
Sure thing. So I am actually the YouTube committee lead at MAPS Canada, as you said, and I'm also a communications and marketing person at MAPS. I'm doing my master's in clinical counseling at Adler, and I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. Happy to have you. And from what I know, you actually have had an interesting sort of like trajectory up to this point. So you lived and worked in India and as
Yes.
well as Canada, and you ran a construction business and built this YouTube channel, and now you're deep into the psychedelic science world and clinical counseling. So when you look back, what is like the common sort of thread that ties these chapters together, and how did that progression sort of work out through all those different areas?
Yeah, I just want to correct one thing. Like, I did not build the Maps Canada YouTube channel.
For sure.
I became the host, but there has been a lot of viewership, so I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
But thank you for your question. I guess I was reflecting on the question before because you sent it to me, and I was I think it's perseverance and doing my best and liking what I do. Because working in construction and design and then coming here and then starting a whole new career and doing psychology, I think it's grit and without sounding narcissistic, I feel like I just want to say that whatever I do, I feel like I put all of my effort in it, and
Mhm.
that has been the common thread. And I also like what I do, so
Yeah, well, that definitely shines through in your work. So,
thank you for saying that.
yeah, of course. And I don't think it's narcissistic at all. But how did that transition like feel, and what actually sparked that? Because those are two very different fields,
Yeah.
construction and psychology. So, how did that come about?
I was always a science kid. Like, I took PCM in India, we call it physics, chemistry, maths. Like, it's like a field that you choose. And I, due to some circumstances, had to go to the interior design school, the construction and design school. And after I came to Canada, it was 2019. And 2019 November, so right after I came in 2-3 months, COVID happened. And I was completely, I mean, me and my partner and my dog were completely isolated. And I started volunteering for this organization called the Chow Foundation in India, which basically I was teaching English and design to women who have suffered acid attack on their body, on their faces, and they're survivors. And that time in the night, like I think I used to teach them from 11 p.m. till 2 a.m. at night, and that part of my day used to be like the best part during COVID times. And I remember going and telling my partners, like, I think I need to do something because this is my purpose. I need to do something to help people. And yeah, I had three options. I decided I'd either become a journalist, I'll either become a psychologist, or I'll become like a lawyer or something.
Mhm.
Um, and I only applied to UBC, and it was fate. I got in, and now here I am doing my degree in clinical counseling 6 years later. Yeah,
Wow,
that's
that's
how it happened.
incredible. Yeah, it's incredible how you can find your passion like when you don't really expect it, like in this volunteer thing that you're doing. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's incredible. And so you're also the YouTube committee lead at MAPS Canada, so I would love to hear a bit more about that. So for
yeah,
listeners who maybe aren't familiar with MAPS Canada, can you give us like the like elevator pitch version? Like what is MAPS Canada and what are they trying to
yeah.
achieve?
So, MAPS Canada is basically trying to achieve access to psychedelic medicine and doing psychedelic research and making it accessible for the general public, and also letting people know that psychedelics are not for everybody. It is for
Mhm.
some populations and maybe not for every other populations. MAPS has also been fundraising, and Ashley recently gave out two research grants to empower psychedelics and Remedy Institute, which I'm really excited about because those studies are pretty cool. And we just represented ourselves at Psychedelic Science 2025 in Denver. That was really fun. Um, yeah, we our fundraise campaign has like we've almost made like half of the mark that we were supposed to reach. So yeah, we're doing a lot this year, but like mostly Maps has been just about uh research and letting people know what psychedelics are about.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, I've done, as we talked about in your part of this episode, I've done some volunteering with MAPS Canada too. So I think it's really cool what's going on there.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple grants and like interesting projects. So what recent clinical trials or like developments in psychedelic therapy and treatment are you personally most excited about and why?
So this study is actually happening in the US. It is the Senate Bill 2308. I don't know if you know about this, but it's the Ibogaine study, which is happening
Mhm.
in Texas. And I'm super excited about this. I had Jonathan Dickinson on podcast, and he spoke about how Ibogaine is really, really effective in opioid use disorder. And I live in East Vancouver, and I see
Mhm.
a lot of addiction and unhoused folks and just trauma. And I feel like the Ibogaine study, like the 50 million that the Texas government has, like government has given to the University of Texas, I think it should be put to good use. And I'm really, really excited about the study.
Mhm. So what exactly are they doing?
I didn't like see the whole thing clearly, but with my talk with Jonathan Dickinson, I realized like the importance of ibogaine for opioid use disorder,
Mhm.
and the Senate bill is all about like passing a law which says that yes, you can study it. So
Okay.
they have not given the description. It's like, yeah, go ahead and study it.
Yeah.
But 50 million US dollars is a lot. So
A
I'm hoping that
crazy
some
amount of money, yeah.
exactly. And it's a bit shocking that it's University of Texas and
I know.
yeah, and
Where
ibogaine.
can I find like a $50 million grant for my research? That'd be great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's very cool. And yeah, so as part of your sort of YouTube committee lead position and hosting the podcast at Maps Canada, you obviously get to interview a lot of leading researchers and clinicians, which like what I do, it's like my favorite part of doing this
Yeah.
podcast is to get to talk to these individuals and have a one-on-one conversation with them and learn from them. So I would love to know more about your interviewees. So who has surprised you the most in these conversations, maybe, and or what is just like someone you've learned a lot from and something that you still think about maybe from a conversation.
Yeah, it's really hard to answer like about one person because I feel like
Mhm.
every single person who has come to the podcast like that I have interviewed so far has been just amazing and like
Mhm.
brilliant at what they do, including yourself. And just like I think because it's the field, like the psychedelic field, they also hone in this sort of wisdom about the medicine and the cultural responsibility and patience. Because like working with the bureaucratic red tape and all of these things, I feel like patience has also been a common thread that I've seen in all of my guests, where the way they carry out clinical trials, or if they're writing a book, like how they approach it. I do want to say that I really found interviewing Mark Hayden a lot of fun, because he sort of exudes the same like energy as I have about psychedelics, and like, the excitement about it. I think I also want to highlight Dr. Olga Chernolos. She wrote a book recently called Psychedelics A to Z, and that book was so well written. It's like for a novice new psychedelic reader or like learner. Literally, it's A to Z. So they're like, it starts with A and then B and then C, and like you have all the topics related to those alphabets. And it's a pretty cute little book. So learned a lot from that book and from Olga as well. Monica Williams is a force of nature. Like, she speaks about racism and trauma, and really like bringing up the cultural perspective from it, and also realizing how women have been sort of undermined in this field a lot, and a lot of work, like women and queer folks, like I don't see a lot of diversity in there, but like when I have researchers and authors and doctors like Monica Williams and Olga and Amod, I feel very hopeful.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, that's a really long-winded answer of
No, that's beautiful.
what you asked.
It's truly like an amazing. I feel so grateful to be able to talk to these individuals, and I can tell that you feel the same way.
Yeah, it's truly an honor. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have this person. Like, I get to like ask the questions that I want to ask to this person directly.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to ask you some questions that I think would be interesting
Yes.
from your expertise. So I want to learn more about your sort of experience in counseling psychology and how that kind of intersects with psychedelic research. So could you talk a little bit about your training in trauma-informed and culturally responsive counseling, and also how these sort of traditional therapy training programs, if there's any tension there between like the academic training and then also like the psychedelic field, or like your passion for psychedelics, and how you're sort of like navigating those different aspects?
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that question. I feel like first I want to talk about like how the training in trauma informed care at like Adler is like immersing in my psychedelic research. I first want to give a shout out to Maria Sabina, the OG curandera. And I think I want to highlight this because we are talking about culturally informed care as well, and decolonizing ourselves. And I feel like everybody else, like it was Maria Sabina who was calling psilocybin her kids, and she was helping people. She was the OG psychedelic assisted therapist. And then Gordon Wasson, and actually it was his wife who was the mycologist, swooped in and sort of took credit for it. So what I'm trying to say is that I try and remember and make sure that wherever I am in, whichever room I am in, to remind everybody that these are indigenous medicines, and that even though I am doing clinical counseling or trauma-informed care, it has been happening since time immemorial. Indigenous people before us, have been doing it. Like, this has been the way it has been. And a lot of the times people say, oh, we are going back to our roots. We are not going back. Our roots have been emerging, and sort of, I feel like it's really important to decolonize ourselves and to make sure that trauma-informed care without decolonizing is not gonna like treat people or not gonna reach people the way it should. And traditional therapy right now is very sorry to say, but whitewashed, and it's run by like, it's all like Freud, Adler, Jung, like they're all white men, like it's these people who started like amazing psychodynamics and psychotherapy and all of these things, but they sort of forgot to include a huge population in their research. And a lot of people don't realize in psychotherapy that they are sort of continuing those traditions of treating the white man. And like, I hope you know what I mean when I say that. But we really need to understand how community plays a role, and how the traditional therapy that is given here in North America is sometimes not at all useful for people of color, for indigenous people, and for Black people. So I think when I'm here learning about psychedelics research and trauma-informed care in multicultural setting at Adler, I'm trying to remember all of these things of how things work and how things don't work, and how even taking psychedelics alone versus in a group community can be so different for let's say a brown community like my community, or even like traditional therapy, one-on-one therapy can actually be harmful sometimes for Asian people or brown people. Like again, research says that, and being with community and taking community medicine can be actually really, really beneficial. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is I just like try and remember all of these things, and whenever I am speaking or getting into a room where there is inequity, I try and highlight these things.
Yeah, that makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense, and I appreciate that answer. You've obviously been involved in like social justice and equity and inclusion initiatives before, so I really appreciate your perspectives on this. And one example is you co-leading the Women Empowerment Club at UBC.
Yeah.
So, what did that experience sort of, how did that contribute to this? And also,
Yeah.
I would like to know how you think psychedelic spaces still need to grow when it comes to equity and inclusion. And you already talked a bit about it, but also cultural safety.
Yeah. The Women Empowerment Club is like so close to my heart. At UBC, I was co-president with this amazing person called Laura, and I guess when I went to UBC, I was looking for a community, and I that was the first club that I joined, and after like I joined it as like a year representative or something, and I remember just like diving in with all of the feminist raging like people, and um, yeah, it was my community. So that was the reason I was in the club, because they all recognize how, as a brown woman coming from India, there's a lot of ideas on how North America is or how Europe is. Like in India, I used to think that North American women have more equality and there's less patriarchy and basically all of that. And then when I came here, it was like a culture shock. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much patriarchy here. Like, there's so much inequity and inequality. And so joining that club was sort of like me going on my same path and seeing, like, trying to do something in the smallest way that I could, where we used to like create podcasts and host events, sort of letting people know that there is inequality that exists. And what was the second question, sorry, that you asked?
I guess you've been speaking about it a little bit, but just if you have any more thoughts on how psychedelic spaces need to grow when
Yeah.
it comes to like equity and inclusion and cultural safety.
Yeah, I really want to see more people of color, indigenous people, black people in this field. Like when I Google psychedelic assisted therapy or when I Google psychedelics research, it can be anything, MDMA, psilocybin, like you name it. I feel like when I see representation, I will trust it more, and I will be able to help my family and friends who don't trust it, like make them trust it more, because for them it's like these are drugs. Like, how do I make them believe when people who are researching it also don't look like us, right? And I think this was in the like FDA issue that happened in the US, like the second study, MAP study, which was rejected. One of the things they said was a lot of like there's no diversity or something like that in the third group. And Rick Doblin was speaking about it, and Rick Doblin was saying, like, if we have more clinicians who look like the population, the participants, then we'll have more participants. Like, for example, if we have more brown and black clinicians, then we'll have more participants who will come in. And I feel like that is really, really important in this field, because, I mean, we live in Canada, and Canada is like the most diverse place I've ever seen, and I've traveled a bit. So I feel like we really need to have diversity in this field, and
Yes.
yeah, safe
Yeah.
access.
I agree. And just for also from like a scientific standpoint, like diversity is important for scientific rigor as well. Like you need to
Yes.
make sure your population is generalizable to like who you want to treat. So from all angles, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
And speaking more on your science communication work with MAPS Canada, I want to know how you approach communicating these science concepts so that it can land with people, and also if there's any like videos that you've been thinking that, or podcasts that you've been thinking that the public really needs right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I would actually suggest like the book Psychedelics A to Z by Olga Shornolos. Like
Yeah.
I feel like it's just so simple and straightforward, and it's not very jargony. So like people can understand that, and if people want to skip the topics of plasticity or something, like it's just little chapters that they can skip if they
Hmm.
don't want to read research jargon. Um, but yeah, I think this is like when somebody asks me, like the first thing I tell them is don't call it drugs, call it medicine,
Hmm.
because just calling it drugs holds so much stigma in their head, like including
Yeah.
my mom would ask me like, but isn't it, because she's a police officer, and she was like, isn't it like drugs, like we arrest people for this? And I was like, yes, but it has medicinal elements to it. So yeah, this is how I approach people. And the other thing I do when I want to like do a bit of knowledge translation to somebody who's asked me a question, I always tell them, please, please, please do the research yourself and do read about it. But I try and tell them things like exclusion criteria of like if you have like schizophrenia in your family, or if you have like bipolar disorder in your family, or if you have it, then like don't do psychedelics. Like just these simple things. But I try and stay away from like the big jargony stuff and just try and direct them to podcasts or even the Maps Canada podcast, like the cautionary tale that I was talking about, I think in your podcast. It's such a great podcast which speaks about like how a clinical trial can go wrong.
Hmm.
And then we also have podcasts where we speak about how a clinical trial can go exactly right and everything happens correctly. So yeah, those are the two ways.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you also, I think, might have some interesting opinions on like the intersection between science and culture and also spirituality. So, where do you personally land on like the spirituality piece, if you don't mind sharing? Because I know that can be a personal thing. Do you
Yeah.
see psychedelics as primarily a clinical tool or a spiritual tool or like something else completely?
Yeah, I definitely think they're a spiritual tool. And in Adlerian psychology, we actually say like spirituality is like one of the sections of our healing. So there's like
Mhm.
work, there's family, there's relationships, and spirituality. And I feel like if you are spiritual, yes, you do need community and all of these different things, but it can really help you find healing within yourself. And with psychedelics, if somebody is trying to find the definition of spirituality, I think it'll really help them find the definition of spirituality. But for me, spirituality is just nature, my dog, his heartbeat.
Mhm.
um, yeah, it's touching moss and collecting leaves. I think that's spirituality, just like observing nature and seeing how beautiful nature is. And yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I like that answer. And getting more into your perspectives on like the future, because I know that
Yeah.
you talked a little bit about Maps Canada and their mission and expanding access to psychedelics. So when you look to that future, hypothetically, like psychedelics are fully integrated into the Canadian mental health care system, what would you say is your biggest hope for how that turns out? And then also on the other side of that, what would be your biggest fear for how that would play out?
Yeah. I think my biggest hope would be that people find healing, especially the people who are like, who have tried everything else and are really, really on the verge of, I guess, giving up, like they find healing. And Yeah. Sorry, I missed the second part of your question
No,
again.
that's okay. I think the second part was, so first, what's your biggest fear? And then also,
Fear.
what's your biggest hope? So you answered the hope part.
The
So
hope part.
yeah.
Yeah, I think my biggest fear is something that you said in my podcast, which was a fear around harm. And really, like, if people don't know, like, what if somebody's adopted and they don't know the genetic history, or even if they do know all of the genetic history and everything, and even if then the psychedelic journey, like, causes harm to the person, I think that is something that I'm really scared of. But I do want to say that there are so many other things that can also cause harm. And I feel like with psychedelic medicine, we need to like trust it before we go
Mhm.
in. And if we don't fully trust it, like we as in like whoever's going to try it as a medicine, if you don't fully trust it, then you shouldn't go in. But if you
Mhm.
fully give it your trust and like believe that the medicine also carries wisdom because it's plant medicine, and what's the word, surrender, I think that will really help and not harm.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And we're coming to the end of the discussion
Yeah.
now, so we're sort of like nearing that. But looking back, because it's sort of when people are listening to this, it'll be the new year, but we're still sort of in 2025 right now. Looking back, was there like a particular study or talk or just something notable from 2025 that kind of shifted your perspective on psychedelics?
Yeah, I I had a conversation with Dr. MJ Malloy, who's a chair right now of BC Center of Substance Use, and he was speaking about how for opioid use disorder and for people with HIV, cannabis has been used, and cannabis has been really helping them with the symptom reduction and yeah, it was just like so cool. And I think I'm super interested in opioid use disorder because again, of is the location of where I live. Um, but I do think that there is a lot of research already done on depression and PTSD and anxiety when it comes to psychedelics, and there are new topics like eating disorder, what you're doing. And I feel like one of the most important things that we need right now in Vancouver is something for opioid use disorder. And his research that is showing like cannabis and how it reduces inflammation, and if somebody has HIV, it reduces inflammation like much more, I think was really really cool, and I'm really excited about that clinical trial and like what's more to come.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's so
Yeah.
many emerging areas that we didn't really think about before, and
Yeah,
it's crazy.
exactly.
Okay, so yeah, this was really fun. And if listeners want to follow up on your work and find Maps Canada, where should they go, and what's sort of coming up that they shouldn't miss?
Yeah, so our new year is actually there. I'm doing this series called The Medicine Within, and I'm calling it The Medicine Within because I consider psychedelics helping us in a way where they show us our own medicine, which is our mind and our body. And this series is like a 7 episode series, and I'm talking about like what are the harms, what are the risks, what happens when you're in the psychedelic journey, what can you do if you don't want to take psychedelics. So I'm really excited about that. It's gonna come on Maps in 2026, and yeah, we have a lot of interesting researchers coming up, like yourself, who's gonna talk about eating disorders. We're gonna be speaking about antisocial and pro-social personalities. Yeah, there's a lot coming in, so stay tuned in.
That's so fun. Yeah. I mean, when you just mentioned the medicine within, that got me thinking about a conversation I had in a previous episode with Keith Williams and
Okay.
Laura Pustafari and Andrea. I'm forgetting her last name now. I think it's Andrea Ann Bedard. And they did a paper on inner healing intelligence. So the concept of the inner healer and how every being sort of like moves towards healing naturally and how that relates to psychedelics. So if you still have like openings in this
Yes,
lesson, like I would definitely recommend looking into their stuff.
I would love that. Please send me their contact.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, thank you so much for doing this, and I look forward to maybe doing this again sometime in the future. This was a fun, like, swap of the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. I hope I am a psychedelic assisted therapist soon and
Yes.
doing some work in this field, and I can come again and speak more about it.
Yeah, I
Thank
would
you
love
so much for
that.
having me.
Of course. Thanks for being here. Thank you so much for listening to this lovely conversation with Osheen Dayal, host of the MAPS Canada podcast. I'd like to thank the Centre for Psychedelics, Health and Research at Queen's University and the support of our sponsors at the Ontario Brain Institute, the Canadian Biomarker Integration Network in Depression, and Providence Care Hospital. Until next time, be well and integrate wisely.